Instead of spending the next 20 seconds telling you how awesome Russell Westbrook is, I'm just going to say this. Me, you, and everyone really wants OKC to add another star next to Russell Westbrook. I think it's going to be extremely difficult to do that. If you look at one guy who I've heard a lot of is Blake Griffin. The Thunder need to sign Griffin. It'd be perfect. He'd go to OKC in free agency. It's great. How the hell are they going to do that? They're already over the salary cap. They have Steven Adams' contract kicking in. There is little to no way that they could actually add a player of Blake Griffin's caliber in free agency. I've heard another rumor, which is that Paul George is available in a trade potentially. Now, if I had to rank which one could more likely happen, I guess this, just because the salaries match up and they'd actually be able to think of a way of acquiring a dude like Paul George. But of course, you'd have to do it in a trade, because you don't want to wait forever for him to enter free agency, and yeah, he'd be perfect next to Westbrook. The only way that's happening is if you trade Victor Oladipo and a first-round pick, and probably more than that. I mean, I like Oladipo, but if Paul George really becomes available, you know how many teams are going to be offering the Pacers stuff to get him? A very large amount of teams in the NBA. And if it's Victor Oladipo and a couple of first-round picks that are going to be probably in the high 20s, I don't know about that one, man. I mean, we got to be honest. They're not in an ideal situation to add talent around Russell Westbrook, just given their salary situations. But we can attempt to find some sort of resolve for them, and there is some money that could be available. We could talk about it some more. I mean, Oladipo, he is a good player. Perhaps he could just improve offensively as the other creator next to Russell Westbrook. I feel like at times they kind of forgot about him in the offense. So just getting him more involved and Billy Donovan running more actual plays for him, that could just be the first step towards just simply being a better team, having Westbrook scale it back a little bit, which could be difficult to do, running a bit more through Oladipo, because he's the other real creator on the team. I think they had the template for it this season with having him with the second unit, but if he's just standing watching Westbrook all the time and then you ask him to immediately take over the offense himself, it's kind of difficult to do. I think the Rockets with Eric Gordon had it down pretty well. If we head over to Andre Robertson, he's an interesting player. I mean, very athletic and a hell of a defensive player, one of the better ones in the league, but the lack of shooting, it's just a real thing. Even if he's improved a lot on getting open and cutting to the rim and getting offensive rebounds, when you can't shoot, eventually it catches up to you, and we saw that in the postseason, especially from the free throw line. Taj Gibson is a free agent, and if you let him go and re-sign Robertson, you're right at the salary cap, which means you might be able to use your mid-level to get a replacement power forward, but they might not be as good as Taj anyway. And this is part of the reason why I say their situation isn't perfect for adding talent. I think they could definitely use a stretch four who can play defense at that position. Good luck finding one of those guys for the amount of money that you actually have to spend, because it's not that much. Now that being said, Gibson's still a nice player who knows how to play off of a star, can hit an open mid-range. His rebounding was kind of weak against the Rockets. That might have been because he was defending Ryan Anderson a lot, but hopefully that's not a trend, because his rebounding has been a strength for him. Steven Adams at the center position, he's about to jump up in salary quite a bit. Defensively, I think he definitely deserves that. The hope would be that he could become more of an offensive player. Never a big-time scorer, but someone who could maybe hit some sort of a mid-range jumper, grab more offensive rebounds, and just contribute more offensively. I don't know if we're ever going to get that from him, but just what he does as a role man, energy guy, as well as a defensive player, he's definitely a valuable center. Now, Enes Kanter, that's a different story. He's making $17 million a season, and he might have his moments in the regular season, but the most amount of minutes he played in round one against the Rockets was 16 minutes in game one. He just sucks too much on defense. He can't be out there against Houston or Golden State or San Antonio or Cleveland. Like, if you got to pay a guy $17 million a year and he can't play in round one, then he's extremely overpaid. But unfortunately, he's still on your roster, and I've been hearing articles talking about how they should trade Enes Kanter. I mean, we'll talk about that one a little bit more in a minute here, but in a perfect world, yeah, it'd be great. Is it actually going to happen? I don't know. The lack of shooting is a real thing on this team, you know? The Thunder have a similar mold to like what the Rockets do, with the dominant ball handler, pick and roll offense, and spreading the floor. The difference is they have nowhere near as much shooting as Houston does. And we can talk about that shooting and the potential for it to emerge. Sabonis at the 4 spot was pretty okay from outside to begin the season. By about month 3, he couldn't put the ball in the basket, and by the time Taj Gibson got there, he's not playing anymore. If he could develop into being a real stretch 4 for them next season, that would be great. There is also Alex Abrinas. I finally got his name right after like the 3rd time mentioning him in a video. His outside jumper was pretty real this season, and hopefully he can just expand on that moving forward, because they just need guys at the wing who can spread the floor like that. Jeremy Grant is interesting. They traded for him from Philadelphia. His defense is pretty okay, but he also shot around 37% from 3 this year as well. I would hope that he would get more consistent minutes from Donovan next season. They traded for McDermott, another guy who can be a knockdown shooter. They really need to implement these guys into the rotation because their defense physicality first mentality, it just means the offense really suffers around Westbrook just because there's not enough guys who can shoot. Jeremy Grant, I mentioned before, he might be the one dude there who can really play defense. But back to Enes Kanter. I've been hearing rumors of like an Enes Kanter for Marvin Williams trade. Yeah, Marvin Williams would be great for the Hornets, or excuse me, for the Thunder, because his three-pointer has developed. His overall like skill as a power forward is pretty good because he's a natural 3. Moved down a position, suddenly his athleticism is more valuable, and he's been a pretty decent defensive player. Why the hell would the Hornets trade that for Enes Kanter, who can't play in round 1? That's the problem here. Everyone wants to trade Enes Kanter because he can't play. NBA GMs kind of know what they're doing nowadays. Well, the majority of them. They're not going to take Enes Kanter and lose a stretch 4 in the process. You may need to look to free agency to do that one, but it's like, you probably want to re-sign Robertson, maybe no more than like for $10 million, and maybe you actually let Taj Gibson go, and then you could use somewhat of your mid-level to go for a guy like Ersan Ilyasova, who they actually traded away. I think he could be the perfect power forward for this team. They just need more shooting, and perhaps that type of guy would be more valuable than what Taj Gibson can give you. Another guy could be Omri Caspi, who may be going for dirt cheap because teams keep on not realizing how good he is. I mean, look, if you could bring back Robertson, Gibson, and get yourself a shooter at the 3/4, that'd be beautiful. I don't know if you can really do that, but I think that's the big thing, is just get some shooters around Westbrook, because you're a strong defensive team. You've got the perfect guy to run a spread offense. The personnel just isn't perfect. Now, I mean, if you could trade for a star player, well, then that's great. Everyone would love to do that. But I think looking at it from a more realistic approach, get some shooting around the guy. Hopefully some of the guys you already have step up, because the money, I mean, it ain't pretty.